I must ask you just first of all about the Biden inauguration today. We've just been talking to Lisa Nandy, the Labour Shadow Foreign Secretary, in terms of our relations. She thinks there's a lot of repair that needs to be done, a lot of work that needs to be done in certainly attempting to get a trade deal. And basically says that Boris Johnson and others are just cozying up to Donald Trump but didn't get a trade deal and really have damaged our relations. Do you agree?
No, I mean, I think Biden is a very thoughtful president. He's very oriented to his international affairs, always has been. That's his history. And he will want to have a good relationship with us. And that's already started. I think, there's been contact between him, and I think he's coming here in the not too distant future. So I think it will be much better than the naysayers argue. Well, what you have to recognise, of course, is that the Americans, no matter who's their president, will strike a tough deal. Everybody does. That's the nature of the world. But we have to do the same, and there's massive amounts of common interest, and we should play on that.
Well, indeed, and it was interesting, again, all this talk that Boris Johnson would be out in the cold because of his supposed criticisms of President Obama and his, as the words of Lisa Nandy, cozying up to Donald Trump. And yet, that Donald Trump was going to turn his attention to other EU leaders like Macron and Merkel. But as it was, the first EU leader, or the first European leader he spoke to by a long way in terms of phone calls, was Boris Johnson.
Yeah, that's right, and that just reflects our long-standing relationship and the number of important issues we have in common. I mean, everything from military to intelligence through to commercial interests. And that's what will be reflected. Presidents and prime ministers reflect the hard reality of the world. They don't reflect the sentimentality of some of our newspapers and commentators sometimes.
Okay, let's move on. Let's talk about where we are at home in the UK, which I think is what's focusing most people's minds, certainly most of my listeners. The lockdown currently, we are seeing deaths announced yesterday. The reported deaths, these weren't all from one day. These are reports in one day of 1,610 people. That is a terrible death toll. Of course, it's not the only people dying at the moment, dying of COVID. People are dying of many other things as well. There are also a lot of people, millions of people, being desperately hurt in the value, the quality of their lives and their livelihoods as well. We're told that the exit strategy isn't even beginning to be starting really until to come into form until Easter in early April, and even then moving into very toughest tier 4 restrictions and local restrictions continuing, and who knows, for many months. Is that the right strategy for the government?
Well, look, the first thing is I've never believed, I think I may even have said on your programme, I never believed this mid-February date. It was always nonsense. Look, this is, I mean, two things. Firstly, of course, you're right. Other illnesses, deaths from other illnesses and other diseases is spiked rather more sharply than COVID has. But then that's because we're in the middle of the winter. I mean, COVID is a very seasonal disease. It hits people with weakened immune systems, and that happens to many of us in the winter. So the likely recovery date, seriously, is more like May. It's certainly after Easter. My hunch is it's May. Look at last year. Look at when the death rates really came down. They came down a bit because of lockdown, but they mostly came down because of the onset of summer. The sunshine starts, people's vitamin D levels go up, their immune systems improve, and the death rate drops away. I'm sorry to say, I think we're going to see high death rates for quite some time. I mean, they'll hopefully fall off a bit in a couple of weeks with infection rates going down. But nevertheless, I fear we're going to have high death rates really until a combination of the vaccination and summers next year comes around, basically.
The trouble with this, of course, is, I mean, again, the vaccine rollout has actually been, I think, a lot better than many of us had feared or expected, although it has been slowing down in the last few days. Some concerns about the supply, particularly the Pfizer vaccine, but we're needing to be hit 360,000 jabs a day to meet that target of the 14 million most vulnerable by the middle of February. And actually, at the moment, we're only about 250,000 a day in recent days. So there are some concerns there. But again, the government, keeps ramping it up, over the week. So there's a lot of hope as well. But if we are relying on the vaccine, The evidence that's coming out of Israel is showing protection from one of the Pfizer jabs alone is really only about 33%, and not the sort of odd 90% that the British SAGE and others have decided, think that it might be. That means that we may see people not having full coverage for quite a long time as those jabs are rolled out to as many people. But also, if the vaccine, and we don't know yet, actually doesn't affect the infection rate, we're still going to see people who are younger, who are not dying but are going into hospital. We're still always going to have the infection rate, the R rate, the struggling hospitals as the reason / excuse for us not to have our country, our lives, our everything else reopened. We could be doing this for months and months and months on end. And as soon as we hit autumn this year, with or without a vaccine, with or without a mutant strain, we will see this endemic virus resurge again. We're going to be back doing this again next year. What is going to stop this becoming the new normal and us never, ever, ever going back to our old lives?
Well, I don't think that will be the new normal. I mean, the first thing to say is, I mean, I've been pretty critical of the government throughout the COVID exercise, but I think on the vaccine they do deserve significant congratulations. And let's not kid ourselves. This is a difficult chain process, and governments are not very good at this. If you were, I don't know, people who run chain processes like supermarkets, you get your milk, you get it out the cow, you put it into a container, you cool it, you then send it off for pasteurization, you then send it off for packing, you then send it off to the distribution center, you then send it off. That's the sort of thing we're doing with these vaccines. And it's a complicated process. One link breaks the chain, and so they're doing a good job of that. Now, I am expecting the government to keep the pressure up on vaccination right through the summer. So that when we get to the other end of the summer, we're talking close to herd immunity levels, if not actually at herd immunity levels, in that direction. And that we've got to get to a point. Boris has got to get us to a point by late spring, as I say, about May, when you can turn around and say, no more lockdowns. All right, that's an incredibly important point, and that will only happen if they they keep their foot flat on the floor on the accelerator on vaccination, because it's the only strategy they have now, I'm afraid. And if they do that, then there'll be a point in late spring where it says there'll be no more lockdowns at all, and at that point the economy will start to recover. If you ran a taxi firm, or if you ran a cafe, you're not going to start to rebuild your business until you're not going to be stop start into the future, and that's the point that's got to come. So I think that's going to be about May sometime. That's why I think May is going to be an important month.
I think it's going to be an important month. I disagree with you though. I think there's going to be demands for more lockdowns from the health lobby in the autumn, and I think we're going to be back into this again, and I don't see how this is tenable for the rest of our lives.
But there'd be massive resistance to that.
Where from? The public support lockdowns. The public have been frightened. They've been frightened out of their wits. They support lockdowns.
Yeah, no, I agree. But I think a lot of expectations have been built on the vaccine. There will be other things too. I mean, vaccine's the key strategy. There will be other things too. I mean, there are parts of the world. If the East Virginia Medical School, to pick one out of the air, has got a number of hospitals it runs, and it runs a protocol which gets a 75% reduction in death rates. How does it do that? It basically just threw everything in the kitchen sink at it. It looked around and picked every technique that appeared to work and applied them all in a protocol, and it managed to cut it. So you're going to see other things coming in as well. But you're also going to see the public expecting the government to have a solution. So far, the public have been incredibly tolerant, incredibly understanding of what is a unique and difficult problem for governments. But they will expect to get their lives back at some point.
I dearly hope so, David.